feel like sometimes life is really mental.
Dude, that's actually a really good name for a podcast.
Overthinking is a superpower because if you use it in the right way, it can be extremely beneficial for you. When people are not aware of these things and they go through those difficult situations, it's very easy for them to automatically be like, oh, it's because that happened or because this happened or it's their fault. They don't dig into it. As soon as you allow yourself to introspect more, you start opening up so many different doors.
Welcome back, everyone, to Really Mental, where we want you to know no matter who you are, you're not alone. Today, we have a great episode with Aryn Jones, and we're talking about the skills that you need to have a healthy relationship and get over jealousy. Now, it's something that we struggle with in relationships all the time. People get jealous, people get upset, people get insecure, and that's okay. What we're wanting to unpack today is how do you build the skills to really combat that? So we're going to get into the episode today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and like us with 5 stars. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend and give us 5 stars and follow us on our social media at Really Mental Media. It allows us to create episodes like this every week and it helps us a lot. So we're going to get into the episode with Aryn Jones today. Looking forward to it.
Well, Aryn, thank you for joining us on the podcast. Really excited for today's chat and hope you are too. First off, could you please tell people a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, well, about myself, I'm pretty much a normal dude, normal guy. But in terms of profession, I am a life coach and relationship coach, and I focus mainly on helping people overcome their insecurities in both those areas. And I think part of my journey was trying to figure out who I really am and trying to really dig into my true self and unlock that.
In that journey, what made you want to go into this profession and to be a life coach and help other people?
I think it was the journey itself, honestly. As I started overcoming my insecurities and unlocking those parts of myself.
Can you give us the rundown of sort of what that looked like when it came to your journey with insecurity and yourself?
I mean, as I said, it's life and relationships. So I would say my first 2 main insecurities that I started to overcome were social anxiety, and then it would be within the relationship realm too. So that specifically was what they call disorganized attachment, which is basically a combination of the anxious and avoidant attachment. But for me, the really big one was jealousy. So being extremely jealous in my relationships, almost that stereotypical, what would you call it, movie character almost type, jealous boyfriend, jealous girlfriend. And the main thing through all of those was basically just getting to the point where I would sit back, look at myself and be like, I hate myself, as bad as that sounds, but I hate the way that I was acting in certain situations and how I felt about myself after those situations. And that's what really started getting me to the point where like I need to do something about this. This just isn't okay.
Yeah, and what made you realize that it wasn't okay?
So I would say the very, very first situation where I was like, whoa, something's not okay, was dating a girl just after high school. And, you know, we were like sexually active at the time, so I had to get like protection and blah, 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 blah. So I got myself a big 12-pack of condoms, right? And, you know, we were obviously using those. And throughout that process, a couple of weeks had passed, and the one day I reached over to like grab some out and realized there were none left. And in that moment, the first thought that came to me was, she's cheating on me. So we kept it at her place because my place wasn't really convenient for that. I was still staying with my dad at the time. Anyway, so in my head, I was like, okay, condoms are at your place and there's none left, but I could have sworn there were at least 2 or 3 left. So something's not adding up here. So the first thought that came to my head was, you're cheating, right? And I asked her, I was like, how are there none left? And her response was, well, I don't know. And I was like, okay, clearly you're cheating on me. And the crazy part is I'd had that gut feeling the whole time where something was going to go wrong, right? She was going to cheat, she was going to leave, she was going to hurt me. And I was like, well, here's the proof, you know, no condoms left and it was at your place, so you must have used them. Anyway, it basically got to the point where I broke up with her because I was like, I can't trust you. You've done this to me, right? Here's all the proof I need. A couple of weeks later, I was packing to go to a friend's house and I was pulling some clothes out my bag. And when I pulled one of the shirts out came 2 condoms with it, same brand. And in that moment, I realized that I had actually packed 2 of the condoms from the box into my bag because we had finally decided to go to my place for a weekend. And in that moment, I also realized that it wasn't my gut feeling. It was really just my insecurity, my anxiety that was like causing me to see these situations in a very different light and then causing really bad outcomes for me.
Man, like hearing that and hearing you talk about those feelings, I like know within myself how pronounced those can feel and like intense. And sometimes, to your point about it being a gut feel, it feels like it's just the truth. And that's the thing with fear, it's false evidence appearing real. And so it's just like you make up this narrative in your mind.
What were some of those core things you learnt that helped you get over jealousy and get over these things you were struggling with?
I would say the very main one for jealousy specifically was that it's not actually about trusting them, it's about trusting yourself. And what I mean by that is, if they are going to cheat on you, right? You can trust them to the ends of the earth, but they might still do that. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. Just your trust isn't going to stop them from cheating, right? So if you can become confident within yourself and who you are, and confident that you've got your own back and you'll pick yourself up afterwards, that anxiety, that stress, that worry almost melts away, because really the biggest fear is if they cheat, then, I'm going to be hurt, I'm less than, I am whatever. But if you know that you are who you are, no matter what happens, that fear, that worry about that outcome just goes away.
Oh, it's so true. So true. Yeah, I feel like it can be so tough to also like let go and give yourself space to realize that, because it can seem like, no, like this is, it has to be like this person. But trusting yourself is so important in every area of life as well, because like there's certain things that will happen in, say, a career sense or like an educational sense, whatever the field area of life is, where it's like you have to learn to trust yourself in that place again, in that space. What would you feel like are the biggest obstacles for people that are just like wrought with relationship anxiety that you've seen?
I think the biggest one, and which is like probably the first 2 or 3 sessions of my coaching, it's about understanding exactly what it is that you're dealing with. When you are, for example, showing up as a very anxiously attached person in your relationships, you will feel bad about how you react, right? You will feel guilty about it. You're like, what's wrong with me? I'm broken, I'm messed up, right? There's something that's just not okay with me. And they only think that because they have no idea why it's happening, right? All they know is something happens, they get this thought, they get this feeling, they go into that fight or flight mode, and then they respond in a way that isn't true to who they are. Yeah. And because they have no idea of, number one, these steps, and number two, where it actually comes from, they then look at themselves and be like, what's wrong with you? So I would say that's definitely one of the biggest things, is the understanding, the awareness, being able to link the one thing to another.
Yeah, all of these things are great to know, and I think being aware of them is the great start, and it allows people to kind of move forward. Once people are aware of these things, right, like with jealousy, they know they have to trust themselves. How do you actually get to a point where you are doing that?
The first step is the understanding, the awareness. The second step is basically formulating that idea in a way that you can start challenging yourself. So, for example, I call it the true self versus the negative voice, right? The negative voice is the anxious attachment, the insecurities within your life, fear of failure, fear of commitment, etc., etc. When you can see that as something that is external to who you are, and it really is, I mean, I won't go into the depth of, my ideology and everything, but it really is something external to who you are. When you can start to separate those two and see the separation, not only within your relationships, but your life, you start to get a better sense and idea of who your true self is. And to make things very simple, once you have that idea, it's about following your true self, ignoring that guy over there, the negative voice, and listening to your true self, and then just taking steps in that direction.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are there any like things that you've found useful, even in your own journey, when it comes to becoming more aware of your emotions?
So, I mean, this is going to sound very basic, but it's really, really important, is that you actually just sit in it and you think about it, right? And that sounds very simple, but this is why I very much believe like overthinking is a superpower, because if you use it in the right way, it can be extremely beneficial for you. And I'm not saying, fall in love with your overthinking and go do that right now, right? But a lot of the time when people are not aware of these things and they go through those difficult situations, it's very easy for them to automatically be like, oh, it's because that happened or because this happened or it's their fault, it's whatever. And then they just block it off, right? They don't dig into it. They don't see why might this be happening. For example, is there anything I'm doing or feeling or experiencing that could be causing some part of this situation? As soon as you allow yourself to introspect more and you face, because I mean, that's difficult, that's uncomfortable. As soon as you get like push yourself to do that, you start opening up so many different doors of different possibilities, different outcomes, different ways of looking at a situation. So I would say overthinking or allowing yourself to dig into those ideas in a much more introspective way will open up so many different thought paths and patterns for you to really start becoming more aware, not only of those things around you, but things inside of you too.
Do you think with people, they're born a certain way, their experiences kind of shape who they are, mixed with their genes and their biology? Do you think people can tangibly change, or is it all about compatibility within who you are with?
Compatibility is a huge part of relationships, but I wouldn't say in that way. I would say the compatibility kind of helps you find yourself within relationships in the sense of, if you very much believe in compatibility, which I highly suggest everyone do, that can help you almost determine and maneuver and navigate relationships. You know, so for example, if you are obsessed with this girl or this guy, but they live in another country and you live in your country, and one of your main things that make a relationship healthy and compatible for you is like physical touch and quality time, you can have a very difficult time in that relationship, right? So like if you really start to understand and have, again, trust in yourself that even though this person's so amazing, if they don't meet your standards of compatibility within a relationship, and obviously you have to be reasonable within that too, right? Then it will help you find your own path within relationships. But yes, I think everybody can change, but I do have like a bit of like a 3 or 4 step formula to know if somebody can change.
Can you take us through the formula?
Yeah, sure. So number one is they have, okay, and we're talking again about everything in life and relationships, in my opinion, it comes down to insecurity, because insecurity is basically just the opposite of confidence, right? And it comes along with like fear, anxiety, worry. If you are in an argument and you are worried you're going to look weak or small, you're going to react in a very angry, hostile way to try and build yourself up, right? If someone is not aware of how their actions are not okay, not healthy, then they'll never work on it, right? So number one is they have to be aware of it. They have to understand that what they are doing or how they are reacting is not okay and not healthy. Number two is they have to be willing, wanting, and able to actually work on it, right? So you can know you've got something wrong with you, but you're in complete denial. So there's no chance of anything changing, right? Number three is, and this is really, really important when it comes to, for example, anxious and avoidant attachment relationships, and I'll give you a brief thing on that now too. It's like an avoidant will very often come back to the relationship because they want that connection, they want that closeness. And after they've broken up, they will say, oh, I get it. I see what I've done wrong. I'm going to like make things change, right? And then nothing changes. So the third step is they have to put actionable steps into place. Because if they're not putting actionable steps into place, the behavior is never going to change. And that just comes down to basic like behavioral psychology, for example. I mean, in general, if you don't do something differently and put it into place, you're not going to get confident in it. You're not going to like actually change it. So those are the three things. So it's, what was it again? Awareness, willing, wanting, and able, and then the actionable steps.
Yeah, I love that.
I wanted to ask with those points, and I think it's really important as what we've kind of said with sticking to a kind of plan and a path. How do you create that plan and a path? Because a lot of people are like, okay, cool, yeah, this makes sense in theory, right? But I don't know where to start. I don't know where to find a plan. I don't know where to find a path that can actually help me and my partner or something like that. Where can they start?
So for example, within relationships and you and your partner, for example, there are actually best practices. You know, a lot of people will be like, there's no perfect, there's no ultimate goal, but there are things that are definitely better than the other. So for example, my biggest suggestion would be just research what the fundamentals of a healthy relationship are and then base everything you're doing in your relationship on those fundamentals. So like a few of them are like, healthy communication. Some of them are like, are you able to be interdependent, right? So there's two sides of the spectrum. There's codependent and there's independent, right? Codependent is like, I need them to be okay and happy and healthy. The other one is like, I don't need anybody, right? The nice one in between is interdependent, where you're like strong and safe and confident on your own, but you're aware that having that person in your life might add to it, right? And that's why it comes to one of my biggest ideologies. Relationships, you shouldn't need them. You shouldn't depend on them. They should be an addition to your life that adds to it, so that you can actually just enjoy them instead of like craving and needing this other person to be okay and happy. That's like one of the biggest things for sure.
That's cool. Yeah, I feel like the attachment styles, whilst each one has its own lane and is different, and the causes of them are different, I feel like what I've noticed about, say the avoidant or the anxious, is that there is some type of extremity, whether it's like the needing or the being scared to like need or want someone. How did you find it when you were like adjusting and trying to model a healthy relationship?
Yeah, not easy, to put it simply. Like, so I'll give you a perfect example. I was actually engaged at 23, and that relationship was, not the healthiest, and both of us were at fault for that. For sure, we didn't have the healthy communication steps in place. And I remember it getting to the point where I was like, this is just not okay. We need to do something about it, right? So I listened to a podcast, I think it was, and they said something about healthy communication that really just hit home for me. And it like switched my belief about like, if you communicate healthily, you're going to be weird, or you're going to be like weak or whatever. And then I realized in that moment that you can only win through healthy communication, especially if you do it the right way. And even though that happened, I still remember myself being like, this feels like so robotic, and like, this is like way too like, it feels like a formality or like a business like transaction or something. But that's only when you are not confident in it. And this is why it all comes back down to like confidence, because the more you practice the skill of healthy communication, the more easily it'll just like flow out of you, right? So when I, for example, help my clients and be like, hey, maybe you could say it this way, right? It'll feel very robotic and sticky and staticky for them. But then I'll say it and I'll show them how it can sound very like calm and clear, right? So I'll give you a perfect example just to hit the point home, where it's like, okay, so let's say someone's feeling very insecure or jealous in their relationship, right? What they're needing is reassurance, but they're terrified of asking for it, because then they might seem like weak or small or needy or clingy, right? But there's a confident way to do that. So, for example, it might come out as, if we look at the anxious, the jealousy might come out as like, oh, do you not love me? Do you not care about me, right? The disorganized will be like, oh, you're cheating on me. You're like this, and that, right? It's that combination of the avoidant and anxious. The confident and healthy way to say it would be, hey, I'm feeling pretty insecure right now. When you give that person a hug, it makes me feel like you want them and don't want me. And I know that's not the case. I know it's my insecurity and I'm working on it. But in this moment, what would really help me is if you gave me a hug or a kiss or said this to me, say you really care about me or whatever it is, right? Now, when I first say that to a client, they'll be like, that's so like, transactional or whatever. Because like, for example, a lot of the time it happens through like the WhatsApp conversations we have, because I help them in between sessions too. But I'll send that to them and be like, maybe you can try this out, right? And then they'll be like, because when they think about saying it in their head, it feels very like businessy, logical, like that. And then I send them a voice note, be like, try say it this way, right? Confidence within the fact that you're insecure almost, right? Owning that and being able to express it like clearly and healthily. That's so important.
One of the things I'd love to get your thoughts on, which was something that came from a therapist that I used to see ages ago, was that this need for like, and I'm not too sure where this sits in with what you're saying as well, is when you're really struggling and say you need that kind of reassurance, sometimes you actually get addicted to that reassurance, and it's actually more important to learn how to self-soothe rather than looking for it externally. So for example, say someone's feeling insecure about, like, I'm just going to use the hug example that we just have all been playing with, right?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, not being avoidant, kind of saying it, but actually not asking for reassurance. Instead, just actually being aware of it and trying to figure out how to self-soothe within themselves, but also allow their partner to know how they're feeling still, so they're not being avoidant towards it, instead of like trying to chase reassurance. Because if reassurance is the only way that they can settle down, then that's not a healthy thing, because it's relying on someone else again. How does that play into what you were kind of saying before with clients and all that stuff as well?
So that, I mean, I love your therapist, first of all, because that's 100%, right? Like that is exactly what you want to look for. And I always say, I'm not here to fix your relationship. I'm not here to like save your relationship. I might even try and help you understand why that person is not good for you, right? Because you can ask for reassurance, for example, in a very healthy, clear way, and they might say, like, get away from me, you're like small or weak or whatever. And then it's like, okay, well, that's clearly not a good person to be with, right? So I always say I'm here to help you build you up, right? You need to be confident within yourself. So it definitely is that combination. And I actually made a video on this on my Instagram. And I got a lot of people being like, what? Like, it should be, what did they call it? Like should be co-regulation, right? Is what they call it. And it's like, yes, there's nothing wrong with co-regulation. But exactly as you said, if you are relying on them for your own reassurance, you are still dependent on them, right? You're still dependent on their regulation, their reassurance for you to be okay. And that's not okay. So what I would highly suggest to everybody is to find for the goal to be able to do that on your own, and then implement the healthy communication to get that extra support from your partner, that extra reassurance, right? But that should not be the goal. The goal should not be for the reassurance. You should be able to do that on your own and then have them as extra support if they're able and willing to. But that should never be the goal. The goal should never be only getting their reassurance.
I guess I just wanted to ask, when it comes to having the confidence to be vulnerable really in any type of relational setting, how can people start to practice that skill to get better at that and just feel more comfortable speaking about it?
I actually have a great analogy for this, which is, I'm so glad you brought it up. So that right there is, again, right, it's an insecurity within vulnerability. It's the fear of being vulnerable. So number one is you have to understand that vulnerability does not make you weak. And this is something I'm very passionate about, where, there's this idea spread around, especially among men, but definitely within women too, where if you have emotions, if you express them, if you have a relationship with them, then you are weak, right? You are less than, you are small. It's the biggest load of crap ever. Like, I have done nothing but become stronger and more successful and everything because of my relationship with my emotions. So the way I like to really frame it, because you really have to change that initial belief first before you can take that step, right? If you can calm that belief down, it becomes easier to take that first step. So the analogy I've come up with is, two people can go into a war. And let me base it specifically towards men, because I know it's more prevalent there, but if you're a female or anything back home, just picture yourself in this situation. Two people will go into a war. Let's say an olden day war where there's arrows coming down, there's people throwing swords around, etc. One of them will have a full suit of armor on because they don't want to get hit by all these arrows and these swords, right? They don't want to get cut, they don't want to get hurt, etc. And they go throughout their battle and they come out unscathed because they've got this big suit of armor on. But in that process, they've gotten dented, and they've gotten, the armor's gotten dented, and they're kind of scared to take it off again. They go home and they go to their family, and they trying to give their wife, partner, whatever, a hug, trying to get their kids to have a good connection with them, physical touch, depth, genuineness. But they can't because they have this suit of armor that they're unwilling to take off, right? Then there's the second person. This guy goes Beowulf style. He goes just a loincloth, right? And he's like, you know what? I might get hit by these arrows, by these swords. But number one, if I do, I'll heal from it. Number two, I'll learn that archer is actually a lot more accurate than the rest. So I'm going to dodge him a bit more, etc., etc. He makes it through the war. He goes home. He's wide open to get that love, that connection, that intimacy, that depth, right? Now, you can see the one goes in trying to hide away from the vulnerability, trying to hide away from the attacks by putting the suit of armor on to stop the vulnerability. The other one is very vulnerable, right? The one with the armor gets no love, connection, and depth. The one without gets love, connection, and depth. Now, let me ask you this. Which one would you say is more strong and courageous?
Definitely the guy with the long cloth just chilling, running through.
That's so much more courage, right? So
Yeah.
much more strength, so much more confidence going into a battle in a loincloth, right? That's why I say that's really for me what vulnerability has come to show me is like, and another thing I'll ask any sort of person here is, if vulnerability it does make you weak, then why is it so hard to do it, right? Why is it so hard to open up? Why is it so hard to express your emotions? It's because you have a massive block to it because of fear. So really, not being vulnerable means you are not weak, but scared.
Yeah, wow. That's such a good example, man.
Is there a balance to being not vulnerable at all and then also too vulnerable?
Yeah, so that's probably where you would come into contact with the ideas of like, oversharing or trauma dumping or things like that. And again, that just comes down to confidence, right? Where it's like, okay, so I'll put it this way. One of my biggest red flags when going into like a first date or something is if they do something like that, right? If they just put it all out there on the table, but here's the important part, right? They put it all out on the table and they view it as like something done to them. They view it as they are like the victim. They view it as they are, woe is me, and like this is everything that happened to me, etc. But somebody could say the exact same things, but say, I learned so much from that, and like I've grown so much from that. It was so awesome. And that would be like that slight switch to like a more green flag where it's like, okay, this is just someone who's very open and expressive and they've learned through it. Whereas the other person is like, I need to get this out. That's like the big difference right there for me. And again, like relationships, all of the stuff we're talking about, they are skills. And this is why I'd say it comes down to confidence. Again, the opposite of confidence is insecurity. How do you become confident at something? You try it, you get better at it, and then you become confident in it. So like healthy communication is a skill. You have to try it, you have to see that it works and then get better at it, and then you become confident in it. Vulnerability is the same, etc., etc. Like insecurity, I really need to put this out there, but like insecurity is not just like, some meek person you see sloping around and like too scared to like have a conversation or talk to someone, right? Insecurity shows up in every aspect of your life. You could have fear of failure within your business. You could have fear of commitment or fear of vulnerability or fear of abandonment in your relationship. I have worked with politicians. I have worked with business owners. I have like Vogue models following me on Instagram and stuff. All these people that somebody would look at and be like, oh, they must be confident, right? Because they've done something amazing in their business or success in their industry. It's like usually the people who have massive success in those areas, I won't say are the most insecure, but will definitely have insecurities because they've funneled all of their confidence into one thing and they've forgotten about all the other parts of their life that they have to be confident in.
So
For
true.
example,
So true.
relationships.
So true. Yeah. We had like this question written down, which I'm interested for your take on, given like what we've sort of touched on so far around attachment, healthy relationships. And it sort of is a full circle to the first example you brought up. Do you feel as though a relationship can be saved when someone has cheated?
So definitions of cheating, I believe, can vary, right? Because you can have two people who are in like a polyamorous relationship, for example, and they are literally, sleeping with other people and they're okay with that. So what I believe like cheating to be is whatever the people have decided on, whatever the two people in the relationship have decided on. And obviously there are extremes. So for example, I very much do not believe, and this is very controversial, so heads up for anyone listening, I don't believe that liking someone's picture on Instagram means they're cheating, right? And I know some people are gonna be like, what? No way. It's like, that's so bad. Blah, blah, blah. But it's like, you have to remember that you're scrolling through Instagram. I like things I don't even realize I've liked sometimes, right? And obviously it's different depending on the situation. Yeah, anyway. It really depends on what the two people have agreed on. And this is where healthy communication comes into play again. Because someone might be sitting there being like, oh, if he like brushes hands with that girl, he cheated on me. And he might be going, oh, if she like kisses that guy, she's cheating on me. So they have these very different perspectives and ideas of what cheating is. And when that's not communicated, that's when these landmines come into play that you could step on without even knowing about, right? For me personally, I would say one of the definitions of cheating would be, I would say anything more than a friendship, right? Because like, and again, this is controversial from what I've seen in the dating space, but I'm very much aware that I can be friends with girls and girls can be friends with guys, right? And within that comes certain levels of like physical touch, right? Like a girl I was in a relationship most recently with, which was my healthiest relationship, she would hug her best friends who were guys, right? And I noticed myself getting a little bit like worried or jealous in those moments, but I stopped myself because I'd be like, again, it's about trusting yourself. If she really were to take it to that next level, kissing them or anything more than that, right? That's when it wouldn't be okay with me. And I had to trust that even if she did do that and were to do that again, it comes back to the trusting yourself thing, I would be okay, right? So not okay and stay, but like okay and be like, that's not okay, you've crossed my boundary, goodbye. I think it really comes down to the reason it happened. So I'll be very honest, I've cheated once in my life. I think I was like 15 or something. And I was doing it because I was just number one, the relationship I was in wasn't true to who I was. And I could sense that, I could feel that, right? Like I was in it because she was really beautiful and that was pretty much the only reason, right? The other girl I had an extremely like good connection with. She was also very pretty, but like we had like that emotional depth. And, that turned out to be one of my most unhealthy relationships, but that's for me what it was. Like that felt more true to who I was, not the cheating itself, but like that person. I just wasn't confident in myself enough to end it with the other person first. So in my opinion, cheating should never happen in the first place. And it only happens when somebody is too scared to be open, honest, direct, upfront, and set those boundaries in the relationship they're in. Because they're probably terrified of hurting the person or being on their own or not working out with this new person, etc., etc. But in doing so, they just make things so much worse, right? And this is why I say like the insecurity, the fear, the worry, the doubt in everything I've seen in my life and in my clients' lives and everything, it only makes things worse. And staying true to who you are, which would be, for example, having integrity and being like, you don't have to tell them as another person, but being like, this isn't working between you and I think we need to end things. Then they can do whatever they want with that other person. You know what I mean? So in my opinion, cheating shouldn't really ever happen, but more than likely will at some point in someone's life if they haven't built that up.
If you've been in a relationship and you've been cheated on, is it possible to forgive someone for that?
People will go back to that same person that has cheated on them. The problem is more often than not, they're still going to hold that resentment, right? They're still going to hold that like, oh, you did that to me, therefore you have to like prove yourself. But there's nothing really that can like, I won't say nothing, but there's very little that can actually satisfy their want and need for proving that. And really that also, it comes back to healthy communication, because a lot of the time people will be like, oh, you cheated on me, that sucks, right? But really it's like, okay, but what did the cheating on you make you feel underneath that? Uncared for, unloved, unsupported. When you can communicate that to them and they can apologize for that, for example, you will feel more heard and understood. People feel like, their partner their partner doesn't understand them, they don't get it, they're not like fulfilling their apology needs and stuff when they don't set up the apology in the right way, when they don't really express what it is they're really wanting to have apologized for.
You could have like that person do everything, like apologize, change behavior. But at the end of the day, like we've been saying with the like trusting yourself, you also have to go inward for that answer of like, can you actually like take on that?
I also feel like there's nothing wrong with not being able to forgive someone for that. Like if you struggle with forgiving somebody for cheating, I don't think you should think of yourself as a bad person at all. It's like, if that is one of your hard boundaries and they've crossed that, I would first ask, was that like very much communicated? Or was it just like assumed and everything like that? But regardless, if that boundary was crossed for you and this is where I say it gets like confusing when like, are you guys in a proper committed relationship? Are you in one of those like situationship things, et cetera, et cetera? But if you're in like a proper committed relationship and they cheat on you, that is a betrayal. And that's why I say it's like a bit of both, right? Like that's a betrayal. That person should not have ever cheated because they should have been confident and like sure of themselves enough to just end the relationship before having to go and like be physical with somebody else. But at the same time, so like if you are not okay with forgiving them and you don't want to right now, maybe like a few years down the line, you feel more like compassionate and everything, that's okay. But yeah, if you are wanting to stay in the relationship, then I would definitely ask yourself, do you have the ability and like willingness to let go of that resentment, even though they have cheated? Because you have to remember, like, if they cheat and you're like, okay, let's keep trying, that is your choice, right? So you have to be confident in yourself and trust yourself to be able to move forward knowing they've cheated and that you want to keep trying.
I know we're wrapping up. We're already kind of 2 minutes over time, but I want to ask, you mentioned something when people are going through a breakup, right? Say that someone's just broken up with someone. Say it's a day after a breakup. Is it a free-for-all then? Can they do whatever you want and you can't get mad?
Of course they can get mad, right? I mean, you can have any feeling you want. But in terms of, I mean, if you look at it logistically, right? You look at like ones and twos, like that person is not with you anymore. So they could do whatever they wanted. Is that going to suck? 100%, right? So it's not really is this okay? Is this not okay? It's like, technically, logistically, they have every right to go and sleep with somebody else the next day if they wanted to. All that should be for you as the person on the other side is confirmation that, you know, that person is definitely not who you want to be with. You know what I mean? So it's less about is that okay or not okay. It's like, use that as like part of your healing process. They slept with somebody the day after your relationship ended. Clearly they weren't like as committed, connected, etc. that you might have been. Right, so use that as that like evidence to be like, I gotta move on from this person.
For real, man. Damn, relationships can leave some scars. Thanks for sharing with us. And I love the model you created around can someone change? I think that's so accurate. I love that. And I love the analogy you used about running through a field with the arrows. I think that's so good. So thank you. And how can someone find you and, you know, find your content and also potentially like schedule a session with you?
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks for having me. It's been really, really cool. I really enjoyed the chat. Pretty much all of my social media channels, so Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Aryn Jones _, so ARYNJONES _. And my website, if you're wanting to schedule a session, you're welcome to send me a DM on any of those. But like, if you want to schedule it more professionally, if you want to call it that, through my website, which is ourinnerlives.net. So OURINNERLIVES.net.
So I love this episode, and I think it's really interesting because so many people struggle with jealousy. And the biggest takeaway for me today was accountability. Aryn speaks about it with his past relationships and how he got into it with his struggles with jealousy. And I think people need to realize they need to be taking accountability for their actions and awareness to try and change and try and fix the things that they're struggling with, and working with their partners to do that, or leaving if it's not healthy enough. So I think it's really important to take action, learn, and improve on those things to ensure a healthy relationships, fulfilling your life. So if you enjoyed this episode and you've learned something along today, please share it with a friend and like us and give us 5 stars and follow us at Really Mental Media. So if you enjoyed this episode today, be sure to share it with a friend that needs to. So if you like this episode today, be sure to share it with a friend and rate us 5 stars on any podcast platform you're listening on, or follow us at Really Mental Media. We're going to be coming out with episodes every week, and we hope you enjoy. Thank you.